in one of the most widely covered criminal cases to make New York's news headlines in recent years. An 87-year-old retired vocal coach named Barbara Meyer Guston was mercilessly shoved to the ground on a Manhattan sidewalk by a stranger in early 2022. For no apparent reason, Guston's assailant charged her from behind, causing the senior citizen to smack her head against the pavement. She was rushed to the hospital and treated for head trauma, but ultimately died from her injuries. Guston's attacker, 26-year-old Lauren Pazienza, turned herself in 2 weeks later and was charged with manslaughter. She denied allegations that she called the victim the B-word and gave inconsistent stories about her role in the unprovoked attack, at one point claiming that she had run into Guston by accident. Pazienza eventually pleaded guilty to first-degree manslaughter with the expectation of an 8-year prison sentence. The judge tacked on an additional 6 months, however, and admonished her for her repeated failure to take accountability for her actions. She sobbed during the hearing, but only managed to choke out a 10-second apology to the victim's family before being nudged by her lawyer to say more. During her second apology, Pazienza said she was so sorry and that she should have never pushed anybody. She began serving her sentence in October of 2023 and will become eligible for parole in 2029, but could remain behind bars until November of 2030. Number 25. Damon Kemp. While investigating reports of an armed burglary in December of 2018, police discovered the murdered bodies of 19-year-old roommates Trey Ingraham and Jordan Payton inside their Daytona Beach apartment. The pair had been shot dead more than 14 hours earlier, and the suspect, 19-year-old Damon Kemp, was already in custody at the Volusia County Jail for an unrelated armed break-in. Ingraham, an up-and-coming boxer with plans to re-enroll in college, had allowed Kemp to occasionally stay at the apartment while getting on his feet. Kemp also stayed with a friend named Quincy Stith, who told local news outlet WFTV9 that the suspect became irrationally paranoid and began rambling incoherently on the day of the shooting. By the time Kemp left Stith's home to go to Ingraham and Payton's apartment, however, it seemed like he was back to his usual self. After the double homicide, prosecutors charged Kemp with 2 counts of second-degree murder. He was wheeled into the courtroom screaming for his bond hearing, where some of the victims' relatives were so overcome by emotion that they chose to leave or were escorted out. Kemp could be heard repeatedly yelling "God" in footage of the bizarre outburst, and his facial expressions and demeanor seemed off throughout the proceeding. Following his trial in August of 2023, nearly 5 years after his arrest, Kemp was found guilty of both murder charges and 1 count of armed burglary of an occupied dwelling with assault or battery. He pleaded with the judge for leniency, highlighting his lack of prior convictions, while arguing that there was no evidence connecting him to the crime. Kemp refused to admit or deny the murders, showing an unwillingness to take responsibility for his actions, and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. Number 24. Jessica Araujo.
Sorry for the pain that I caused your family, and I'm sorry for the pain that I caused my family.
25-year-old Jessica Araujo's blood alcohol content was nearly 3 times the legal limit when she ran a red light in Miami-Dade County in April of 2016 and crashed into a Toyota Prius. She was traveling at a high rate of speed at the time of the accident, which occurred at around 1:30 a.m., with the force of the collision causing the cars to crash into a Toyota Corolla in the opposite lane. The driver of the Prius, 48-year-old Naji El-Kadi, died after being airlifted to the hospital in critical condition, while Araujo and the Corolla driver survived with minor injuries. A blood draw from nearly an hour later measured Araujo's blood alcohol level at 0.225. She was also high on marijuana at the time of the crash and had cocaine in her car, resulting in her arrest on suspicion of DUI manslaughter, reckless vehicular homicide, cocaine possession, DUI causing bodily injury, and reckless driving causing bodily injury. In October of 2017, Araujo pleaded guilty to DUI manslaughter. During her plea hearing, her defense attorney pushed for leniency, while her friends and family testified that she was a good person at heart who had defeated addiction. Araujo tearfully apologized to both her victims and her loved ones during the proceedings, saying that she was sorry for the pain she had caused. The prosecution argued that the defendant's actions on the night of the accident reflected her true character, while highlighting how she cursed the police and hospital employees, while imposing a 10.5-year prison term followed by 9 years of probation. The judge acknowledged Araujo's remorse and her efforts to turn her life around. In addition to incarceration and supervision, he ordered the convicted killer to serve 500 hours of community service and to attend weekly Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. Number 23. Ryan Michael Bate. Sergeant Lee Sorensen and Officer Eric Estrada were killed on Sunday, August 14th of 2025 while responding to a domestic disturbance in Tremonton, Utah. The events leading up to their deaths began at around 9:30 p.m. when the two officers were summoned in response to multiple 911 hang-up calls. At the scene, they spoke with the wife of 30-year-old Ryan Michael Bate, who accused her husband of headbutting her, slamming her head into a door, and choking and restraining her while threatening to kill her in front of their 3 children. Bate stepped outside and opened fire on the cops, killing Estrada and Sorensen, while a third officer, Box Elder County Deputy Mike Allred, and his K-9 were both shot and survived. Bystanders eventually persuaded the suspect to drop the weapon and surrender. He has since been charged with 2 counts of aggravated murder, attempted aggravated murder, and multiple domestic violence-related crimes. During a virtual court appearance 8 days after the double homicide, Bate could be seen hanging his head and sobbing as he learned the charges he faced and the prosecutors planned to pursue the death penalty. The judge denied bail and remanded him to the Box Elder County Jail, where he's banned from having contact with anyone other than his defense attorneys without prior permission. Number 22. Jkwon Williams. 47-year-old Latoya Scrivens lost her life at the hands of her own son, 20-year-old Jkwon Williams, who shot his mother in the upper torso at their Stockton, California home on New Year's Day. Emergency responders arrived at the home to find Scrivens clinging to life with a bullet wound and rushed her to the hospital, where she died from her injuries. Several hours after the shooting, Williams was arrested and booked into the San Joaquin County Jail on suspicion of voluntary manslaughter and weapons charges. During his first court appearance 2 days later, he and several others could be seen and heard sobbing, with some people so overcome with emotion that they had to leave the courtroom. Social media posts from family members stated that Williams and Scrivens had a close bond, leading one to wonder what led up to the shooting. Prosecutors initially accused Williams of killing Scrivens willfully, unlawfully, and without malice upon a sudden quarrel and heat of passion. The arraignment was adjourned for the following month, and the charges against Williams were upgraded to second-degree murder in March. In the amended complaint, prosecutors wrote that Williams had in fact killed his mother willfully and unlawfully. Under California law, second-degree murder typically occurs with malicious intent, but not necessarily in a premeditated fashion. The case appears to be ongoing. Number 21. Toby Madden.
I would give anything to talk to her one more time, to see her be silly and laugh with my daughter, Layla. But I know I will never, because Toby took that away from us.
On a Tuesday afternoon in October of 2022, police responded to a call about a deceased person at a Hamilton, Ohio home. As officers arrived at the scene, someone was seen running out of the residence and yelling, "I think she's dead." Inside the home, members of law enforcement found the deceased body of 50-year-old Rachelle Brousseau on the floor. She had been stabbed at least 55 times by her long-term partner and the father of her child, 54-year-old Toby Madden, who initially denied responsibility for the crime. He was charged with murder, and the proceedings were delayed due to concerns surrounding Madden's mental state and because he fired 5 defense attorneys and tried to represent himself. Madden was ultimately declared competent, and the case inevitably went to trial in September of 2024. Madden maintained his innocence until the beginning of the trial, when he tearfully admitted to killing Brousseau after he saw family members enter the courtroom and broke down sobbing. He apologized to them and Brousseau's adult daughter, saying, "I am sorry, we got into an altercation. I am basically the one who did it. Don't hate me. I love you." Despite Madden's admission, the trial continued as planned. After deliberating for just over an hour, the jury found him guilty on all counts, including murder and felonious assault. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison to run concurrently with an 11-year sentence he was already serving for an unrelated drug case. Number 20. Alexandria Thomas. 18-year-old Alexandria Thomas claimed that she had just poked her boyfriend with a knife after she was arrested in 2013 for stabbing the victim during an argument outside a Publix supermarket in Royal Palm Beach, Florida. The young woman was accused of plunging an 8-inch blade into the man's chest, later telling investigators that she just wanted him to leave her alone. Thomas was shocked to learn during her first court appearance that her boyfriend had been placed in a medically induced coma due to the severity of his injuries. Both she and her mother reacted hysterically and broke down sobbing in the courtroom, where deputies were seen helping them up. Prison records show that she was released in 2017 after serving part of a 3-year and 4-month sentence for felony battery. Number 19. Jose Martinez. 43-year-old Jose Martinez narrowly survived a gunshot wound to the head after he tried to permanently solve his problems on New Year's Eve in 2010. Before turning his attention toward himself, he fatally shot his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend, 34-year-old Marcel Paredes, at a home in Paterson, New Jersey. After receiving treatment for his injuries, Martinez was detained at a psychiatric hospital in Trenton while undergoing competency proceedings to determine whether he was capable of moving forward with the murder charge that he faced. He remained there for 3 years while repeatedly interrupting court hearings by howling hysterically and was eventually deemed incompetent in 2015. A new psychiatric report stated that the defendant's condition had improved, and the court reinstated the murder case against Martinez. The judge ordered the prosecution and defense to try working out a plea deal, but Martinez interrupted a scheduled plea hearing in December of 2016 by foaming at the mouth, crying, shaking, and refusing to talk to his attorney. After calming down, Martinez was led into the courtroom where his outburst almost immediately resumed. He could be seen and heard wailing, gasping and sobbing while shaking uncontrollably in front of the judge, who rescheduled the hearing for a later date. The case dragged on until June of 2018 when Martinez was convicted of aggravated manslaughter and sentenced to 20 years in prison with a mandatory minimum non-parole period of 17 years. Records list a projected release date of December 30th, 2027. Number 18. Jorge DePina. Aleida DePina moved from Cape Verde to the United States in hopes of better opportunities, but her life was tragically cut short during childhood at the hands of her abusive father. The events leading up to Jorge DePina's arrest unfolded on July 3rd of 2013, when police responded to a call about a suspicious death at a hospital in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. DePina had brought his unresponsive daughter to the emergency room where doctors observed cuts, burns, and other injuries indicative of abuse. An autopsy found that Aleida had died from a perforated intestine caused by blunt force injury, and DePina was charged with the girl's murder despite his claims of innocence. While searching the suspect's residence, police found a camera containing footage of the violent mistreatment Aleida endured during her final days. In the video, DePina could be seen striking Aleida in the face, whipping her, blindfolding her, threatening to kill her with an electric cord, and forcing her to perform grueling exercises for minutes at a time. Despite being responsible for the horrific injuries that caused his daughter's death, DePina had a hard time watching the footage when prosecutors played it during his trial in the spring of 2018. During the videos, he could be seen holding his head in his hands and crying, but the tears didn't last very long and he appeared emotionless when the hearings resumed. 2 days later, DePina's defense attorney argued that Aleida could have died from injuries unrelated to the abuse, but the defendant was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison following the 3-week trial. Number 17. Keenan Jackson. 37-year-old Keenan Jackson's blood alcohol content was nearly 4 times the legal limit when he fatally mowed down a high school senior in Las Vegas earlier this year. 17-year-old Mackenzie Scott was crossing the street in a school zone on May 2nd when Jackson hit her with his car. Following the wreck, Jackson was charged with DUI resulting in death and driving 50 or more miles per hour over the speed limit while demonstrating a reckless disregard for safety. During his arraignment, he could be seen weeping and wiping his tears with his jail uniform while Scott's family members held up a photo of her in the courtroom. Records show that Jackson is being held at the Clark County Detention Center with bail set at $1 million. If convicted of the DUI causing death charge, he'll face between 2 and 20 years in prison. But it won't be long enough, according to Clark County District Attorney Steve Wolfson, who said that there's ongoing legislation to increase penalties for DUI-related crashes. Number 16. Jacob Morgan. 17-year-old Jacob Matthew Morgan was babysitting his infant brother Joshua in March of 2015 when the family's Rock Hill, South Carolina home caught fire. The baby died from his injuries, and prosecutors would later accuse Morgan of causing the fire by playing with matches and setting a blanket ablaze using a tea light candle. After alerting neighbors to the fire, onlookers prevented Morgan from returning to the burning house due to safety concerns. They were unaware that his brother was still inside the home, so no one rushed to retrieve Joshua from the blaze. Morgan's loved ones acknowledged his unhealthy fascination with fire, but denied that he would have harmed his brother on purpose. They supported him in court when prosecutors charged him with murder, homicide by child abuse, and first-degree arson, saying that they wouldn't attend the hearings if they thought Morgan had acted with intent. The teenage defendant cried during multiple proceedings, including a probable cause hearing that took place in May of 2015. He also wept during a hearing in February of 2016 while pleading guilty to reduced charges of involuntary manslaughter and unlawful conduct toward a child. Additionally, Morgan entered an offered plea to third-degree arson and received consecutive prison sentences totaling 15 years plus 5 years of probation. He was denied parole in May of 2022 but was released later that year after serving 7 years behind bars. Number 15. Michelle Carter. After meeting as teenagers in 2012, Michelle Carter and Conrad Roy became extremely close over a 2-year period while communicating almost exclusively through text messages. They both struggled with mental health issues including depression, and Roy often opened up to Carter about his emotional pain. For a long time, Carter acted supportive of Roy and encouraged him to get professional help, but that stopped in 2014 when she was accused of encouraging him to engage in dangerous activities that led to his death by way of carbon monoxide poisoning. Despite her lack of physical involvement in the tragedy, Carter was charged with involuntary manslaughter for pushing Roy toward his untimely fate. She was found guilty during a bench trial with a judge, noting that the defendant urged Roy to get back into a vehicle that she knew was filled with carbon monoxide. During her sentencing hearing in August of 2017, Carter could be seen weeping as the judge imposed a 15-month prison sentence followed by 5 years of probation. She was allowed to remain free while appealing her case, but the original conviction and sentence were upheld, ultimately leaving her with no choice but to serve her time. Carter was released from prison 3 months early in 2020 due to the state's good time laws, which allows inmates to reduce their sentences by up to 10 days per month. Number 14. Gabriel Poletti. Rasul Afzili and his wife Anila were on their way home from a birthday party in West Sacramento with their 2 children in February of 2021 when a drunk driver traveling in the opposite direction struck their vehicle head-on at a red light. The couple were pronounced dead at the scene while their young son and daughter miraculously survived the wreck. The drunk driver, 27-year-old Gabriel Poletti, had at least 1 prior DUI conviction under his belt and had been arrested on another DUI charge just 2 weeks before the deadly wreck. After being hospitalized with serious injuries, he was booked into custody on a laundry list of new charges, including 2 counts of murder and 2 counts of DUI causing injury. During a virtual court hearing a few weeks after the accident, he could be seen weeping while he buried his head in his hands and wiping his eyes with a tissue. In May of 2023, Poletti pleaded guilty to the murder charges along with vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated and DUI causing injury. In exchange for his plea, the Yolo County judge overseeing the case had agreed to sentence the defendant to 7 years in prison, followed by a term of 15 years to life. Prosecutors and the victims' families opposed the deal but were ultimately unable to stop it from going through. State records list the parole eligibility date of May 2035, which means that Poletti could see freedom again after serving just a portion of his minimum 22-year sentence. Number 13. Mark Bent. After leaving a car club called the Castaways due to its members street racing and other alleged illegal activity, 43-year-old Mark Bent heard that the group was spreading rumors about him being an undercover cop, resulting in threats against his life. Drunk on Jägermeister, he got behind the wheel of his car one day in September of 2022 and drove to Idaho Falls, Idaho, where he opened fire on the club's leader, 23-year-old Nicholas "Nick" Bird, outside the victim's home. Shortly after the shooting, Bent turned himself into law enforcement and confessed to the crime. During an initial court hearing, he could be seen crying as the prosecutors listed his charges and informed him that he could face the death penalty. Bent would later claim that he blacked out and had no memory of shooting the victim 17 times, despite admitting on Facebook that he had planned the murder months in advance. Testifying in his own defense during his trial in late 2024, he claimed that the next thing he remembered was seeing Bird on the ground, but his version of events left the jury unconvinced and he was found guilty of first-degree murder with an enhancement for using a deadly weapon in the commission of a felony. During Bent's sentencing hearing in February of 2025, Bird's family said that there was never any evidence to indicate that the Castaways had bullied the defendant. He was sentenced to 45 years to life in prison. Number 12. Peter Gamble. 48-year-old Jared Irvin lost his life in January of 2022 when 31-year-old Peter Gamble pulled a gun and opened fire on him during an argument at a gas station in Camp Washington, Ohio. Several people witnessed the shooting, including 2 Cincinnati police officers, and Gamble was charged with murder, aggravated murder, and felonious assault. During his arraignment, 2 days after Irvin's death, the defendant could be seen crying throughout the hearing while his attorney claimed that there was video evidence proving that Gamble had acted in self-defense. Prosecutors disagreed, claiming that surveillance footage showed Gamble firing while Irvin ran away and that he kept shooting after the victim was on the ground. Gamble protested the judge's decision to set bond at $750,000, saying, "Come on, man, he was chasing me, while being led out of the courtroom. After the hearing, his defense attorney maintained his client's innocence, stating, "We're confident once the video is released, he'll be cleared," but prison records show that Gamble was convicted of voluntary manslaughter and aggravated assault and is currently serving prison time with a parole eligibility date of July 2035. Number 11. Jordan Fuss.
I'm so sorry. I wish it was me. He did not deserve it. I did.
19-year-old Jordan Fuss was intoxicated and driving around 100 miles per hour in a 45-mile-per-hour zone when he struck another vehicle in Davie, Florida, in October of 2014. According to police, he flew through an intersection and rammed into a car occupied by a woman and her 2 children, with the force of the impact tearing the victim's vehicle in half. The mother and one of her kids survived the crash, but her son, Santiago Mondragon, was pronounced dead at the scene. Witnesses later testified to seeing Fuss swerving in and out of lanes before the crash and that he made no apparent effort to slow down prior to the accident. Responding officers and others noticed a distinct odor of alcohol on his breath, and his blood alcohol content tested at nearly 3 times the legal limit. A toxicology test would later show that he was likely high on marijuana when the collision occurred. Fuss was charged with vehicular homicide, reckless driving, and DUI manslaughter. In 2017, he pleaded guilty to DUI manslaughter, hoping that his willingness to take accountability for his actions would earn some leniency from the judge. The convicted killer sobbed as he apologized to the Mondragon's family in court, saying that he wished it had been him instead. But his tears earned no sympathy from the victim's father, who said, "May God forgive you because I can't." The judge sentenced Fuss to 14 years and 7.5 months in prison, causing him to cry more as he told his family he loved them and was let out of the courtroom. Prison records list a projected release date of June 2030. Number 10. Taden Jones. A Colorado teenager's decision to drive intoxicated proved tragic in April of 2016 when he fatally struck 2 elderly women in Centennial while under the influence of alcohol and drugs. 18-year-old Taden Jones was speeding when he rammed into a vehicle occupied by 77-year-old Audrey Burton and 82-year-old Gail Buckwalter, who were ejected from the car by the force of the impact. According to police, Jones tried to give law enforcement a fake ID stating that he was 23 before they learned his true age. He admitted to drinking 3 beers before the crash and was charged with 2 counts of vehicular homicide, along with 1 count each of reckless driving and possession of a forged instrument. Following his first court appearance, the team was seen sobbing in a family member's arms in the courtroom hallway before exiting the building. In January of 2017, Jones pleaded guilty to 2 counts of vehicular homicide while under the influence. He was sentenced to consecutive terms amounting to 12 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervision, falling short of the prosecution's recommended 20-year term, but far above the defense's request to spare the defendant from prison time altogether. Records show that Jones is roughly 10 years into his sentence and will be released in February of 2028. Number 9. Joseph McAlpin. In April of 2017, an Ohio man named Joseph McAlpin entered a Cleveland car dealership with plans to steal cars while 2 co-conspirators waited down the street. While there, he murdered the owners, Michael Kuznick and Trina Tamola Kuznick, along with the couple's dog. Autopsies would later reveal that all 3 victims had been shot in the head. McAlpin and his accomplices stole 2 cars from the lot and all the cash they could find, leaving a scene of carnage behind that was later discovered by the Kuznick's adult son. Police recovered the stolen vehicles with help from a tipster who implicated McAlpin and his brother Jerome Diggs in the crime. Cell phone records, surveillance footage, DNA, and other evidence further linked McAlpin to the double homicide, resulting in his arrest on a multitude of charges. In April of 2019, a jury found McAlpin guilty on all counts, including aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, aggravated burglary, kidnapping, grand theft, and animal cruelty. Hoping to spare him from capital punishment, family members testified about his difficult upbringing during his sentencing hearing. The defendant cried repeatedly throughout their testimony before making his own plea to avoid the death sentence while acting as his own attorney. McAlpin was nevertheless sentenced to death plus 63 years, and he's been challenging his case ever since. His death sentence was upheld in May of 2022, but a stay of execution was granted the following year, putting his original planned execution date of May 2026 on hold until he exhausted his appeals. Number 8. Trey Alexander Relford.
Trey Alexander Relford. I feel so sad for you that you have to be in this situation. I wish I could help you, as I help my son to be a good citizen. If Salahuddin were to be here, if he alive, he would forgive you. That's the way he was. That's the way he is. I'm not angry at you for being part of hurting my son. I'm angry at the devil. I blame the devil who misguiding you and misleading you to do such a horrible crime.
22-year-old Pizza Hut driver Salahuddin Jitmood was robbed and stabbed to death in April of 2015 while delivering an order at a Lexington, Kentucky apartment complex. Investigators traced the crime to 24-year-old Trey Alexander Relford and 2 other suspects, who prosecutors accused of stalking delivery drivers well in advance of the deadly robbery. Relford denied killing Salahuddin, but was accused of planning the robbery and providing the murder weapon. Authorities arrested all 3 suspects, but only Relford was indicted by a grand jury. In November of 2017, he pleaded guilty to complicity to murder, complicity to first-degree robbery, and attempted evidence tampering, resulting in a prison sentence of 31 years. The sentencing hearing took a shocking turn that no one saw coming when Salahuddin's father, Abdul Munim Sombat Jitmood, forgave the defendant for killing his son and embraced him in the middle of the courtroom. Relford cried, while others, including the judge, could be seen fighting tears before the hearing resumed. Jitmood credited his faith in Islam for his decision to forgive his son's killer, whom he encouraged to use his time in prison wisely, so that he emerges a productive member of society.
No, I don't blame you. I'm not angry at you at all. I want you to know that. I forgive you on behalf of Salahuddin and his mother.
Number 7. Yuland Stanfield. 42-year-old mother of 3, Christine Santuri, was murdered by her ex-boyfriend at her East Providence, Rhode Island home on Mother's Day in 2015. She had previously obtained a restraining order against her killer, 45-year-old Yuland Stanfield, who sent the victim threatening text messages before lying in wait at her apartment complex. After forcing Santuri into her apartment and stabbing her to death, Stanfield fled the scene. He was captured a short while later and charged with 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of violating a restraining order. Stanfield broke down during an initial court hearing, wailing at the top of his lungs while deputies held him up and escorted him out of the room. He pleaded guilty in May of 2017 and apologized for killing Santuri during his sentencing hearing. But his regretful admission failed to convince the judge that he was truly remorseful for his actions. Records show that Stanfield has an extensive criminal history consisting of at least 24 convictions, including violent crimes that he committed before he killed Santuri. But he is unlikely to harm any innocent victims ever again, owing to the judge's decision to sentence him to life without parole. Number 6. Scott McHugh. After snorting heroin with a friend in Cleveland, Ohio, one evening in August of 2018, 19-year-old Scott McHugh made the regrettable decision to get behind the wheel of his Chevy Cruze. He was traveling well over the 25-mile-per-hour speed limit when he fatally struck 21-year-old Janasia Summers as she rode an electric scooter. The victim was hit from behind and went flying into the air from the impact of the crash, resulting in a catastrophic head wound that she died from later that day. McHugh kept driving after the accident and was found passed out from an apparent overdose in his vehicle a few blocks from the scene. Emergency medical responders revived him with Narcan, and he later claimed that he had no recollection of the night's events prior to waking up in an ambulance. The team revealed that he had a history of drug addiction and had been clean for 50 days before recently relapsing. But he wouldn't be returning to rehab this time. Instead, landing in the Cuyahoga County Jail on a $50,000 bond for aggravated vehicular homicide. McHugh could be seen breaking down in tears during his first court appearance while his defense attorney comforted him. He pleaded not guilty, but records show that he was convicted of the charge in 2019 and is serving an 8-year prison sentence with a parole eligibility date of August 2026. Number 5. Ronald Burgos-Aviles. A U.S. Border Patrol agent committed the unthinkable in April of 2018 when he murdered the mother of his child and their infant son in Laredo, Texas. 27-year-old Griselda Hernandez and the little boy Dominic Alexander were brutally stabbed to death at Father McNabo Park, where their killer had used his law enforcement training and expertise to destroy as much evidence as possible. Police discovered the victims' bodies after receiving a 911 call from 28-year-old Ronald Burgos-Aviles, who was quickly identified as a person of interest in the case. Despite his efforts to conceal the crime, he was ultimately linked to the murders and charged accordingly. In July of 2023, a jury found him guilty of capital murder but spared him from death row, instead recommending 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Burgos-Aviles could be seen crying in the courtroom during the penalty phase of his trial, but if he feels any remorse for his actions, he hasn't shown it through his post-conviction efforts to win a new trial. 2 months after being found guilty, he filed a motion arguing that the verdict contradicted the law and evidence that were used in the case. The appeal appears to be ongoing, but District Attorney Isidro Alanis said that he's confident the original ruling will be upheld. Number 4. Ezekiel Kelly. 3 people were killed and 3 others were injured in Memphis, Tennessee on September 7th of 2022, when 19-year-old Ezekiel Kelly went on a shooting spree throughout the city. His rampage began shortly before 1 o'clock in the morning when he shot 24-year-old Dwayne Amir Tunstall in the driveway of a residence where the 2 men were hanging out with friends. Hours later, 62-year-old Richard Clark was found shot to death in his vehicle outside a gas station. Before continuing with his crime spree, Kelly went live on Facebook and rambled in a seemingly delusional fashion about being a hitman for the Crips. He also stated that he planned to kill more people before getting into a shootout with the police. Kelly killed his 3rd fatal victim, 38-year-old Allison Parker, during a carjacking roughly 90 minutes before being apprehended in a police pursuit. Following his capture, he was charged with more than 12 crimes, including first-degree murder, terrorism, and carjacking. Prosecutors planned to pursue the death penalty, but Kelly avoided capital punishment by pleading guilty to all counts in exchange for 3 life sentences plus 221 years. He could be seen crying during his sentencing hearing in August of 2025, while the victims' family members delivered powerful impact statements. Kelly apologized for his actions, stating that there was nothing he could do to change things, but that he had found God. The defendant's words were too little, too late for one of the surviving victims, Randy Graham, who said he was unconvinced of Kelly's remorse and that he believed the convicted murderer was saying what he thought he should say in order to convey regret. Number 3. Zi'Aire Duffy. 25-year-old Zi'Aire Duffy was already on parole for a previous offense when he accumulated 8 additional criminal charges in 2018 for drug trafficking, having a gun, and leading police on a high-speed chase in Lorain County, Ohio. After giving him several opportunities to avoid jail or prison, the judge gave him one final opportunity to explain his actions through tears. Duffy pleaded for leniency, claiming that he was doing good before his most recent run-ins with the law. He denied selling drugs, despite large amounts of narcotics being found in his house during a raid, and insisted that he was trying to get his life on track. Duffy broke down crying even harder at the thought of hard prison time, and while he swore he wasn't a monster, the judge challenged him based on the facts of the case which implicated him for his crimes. The defendant was sentenced to 13 years in state prison, which is arguably minor compared to the 22-year federal sentence he later received in 2019 after pleading guilty to possession with intent to distribute heroin, fentanyl, and cocaine. Number 2. Timothy Durden. In July of 2012, Timothy Durden mowed down 56-year-old Rosemary Temple during a drug-fueled rampage throughout Seattle's Interbay neighborhood. He was already no stranger to the court, with multiple previous convictions stemming from his poor driving habits, but his reckless behavior was no longer excusable after killing an innocent civilian. Prosecutors argued that Durden had plenty of time to avoid swerving into oncoming traffic prior to crashing into Temple's vehicle. Another victim, Barbara Kakis, suffered long-term damage to her wrist, leaving her drowning in medical bills in the accident's aftermath. After the accident, Durden admitted to smoking marijuana before getting behind the wheel. He tested positive for the drug but managed to avoid having the evidence held against him in court. Due to an officer's failure to obtain a warrant beforehand, Durden was nevertheless found guilty of vehicular homicide and vehicular assault following a jury trial in November of 2013. He apologized profusely with tears running down his face during his sentencing hearing the following month, but Durden's victims were unconvinced by the display, especially considering his lengthy history of dangerous driving. The 50-year-old was sentenced to the maximum of 4.5 years in prison and was hauled out of the courtroom by deputies after being denied an opportunity to hug his wife goodbye. Number 1. Christopher Wilson. Child predator Christopher Wilson of Little Egg Harbor, New Jersey, has been classified as a high-risk offender since his teen years and has a history of violating probation. He was 20 years old when he was arrested yet again in January of 2016 for approaching a pre-teen girl as she got off the school bus and offered her a game console in exchange for inappropriate acts. Less than a week later, Wilson was released from pre-trial detention under the state's newly introduced and controversial bail reform laws. Outraged that the defendant had walked free, prosecutors appealed the decision, and an appellate court ordered Superior Court Judge Wendell E. Daniels to reconsider the ruling. In the meantime, the Ocean County Association of Chiefs of Police called for changes to the new bail reform policies after seeing a Facebook post from Little Egg Harbor Police Chief Richard Busby, who warned the community that a dangerous defendant had been released into the community. After reconsidering the allegations against Wilson in the context of his past offenses, Daniels remanded Wilson back to the Ocean County Jail in March of 2017 to await trial for the charges he faced, which included attempted assault and child endangerment. As a sheriff's deputy escorted the defendant out of the courtroom, he began to cry and asked his father to call his fiancée, who was pregnant with their child at the time. Wilson pleaded guilty to the attempted assault charge in September of 2017 and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. During that time, he was ordered to undergo treatment to correct the problematic behaviors that had landed him behind bars.